the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from meats. Thus Paul tells Timothy 1 epistle, 4:1-3, Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, etc. This, we must acknowledge, has been and is now fulfilling. The whole, almost, of the Christian world have departed or changed their faith within 15 years. Seducing spirits are evidently at work. Hypocrites are multiplying among us. Roman Catholics, Shakers, Pilgrims, Fanny Wright, Owen, and others forbid to marry. Roman Catholics and many others among us are teaching to abstain from meats and drinks, which God hath created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. This was a long-lived kingdom. They the saints, the times, and the laws would be given into his hands for a time and times and the dividing of times. The reader is referred to chapter 11:13, margin, to the 7th verse of chapter 12 and to Revelation 12-6. 13-5 and Numbers 14:34 for different expressions giving the same time and referring to the same power. This time, 3½ years, or 42 months, or 1260 years, as it is variously designated, began in 538, when 3 horns were plucked up to make way for the establishment of this one power, the little horn. It continued until 1798, when his dominion was taken away. His power, however, is not yet destroyed.
His audacious heresies. This perhaps is the most striking mark of all, and in which the Roman pontiff has never had his equal. Daniel says of the littleborn, a king diverse from the other 10, shall think to change times and laws. This denotes the unparalleled attempt which the Pope has made upon the laws of his God, pretended to change the law in its sovereignty, in its sanction, in the extent of its promulgation, in its contents, in its morals, and in its doctrine, I say in its sovereignty. He alone on earth, proclaiming himself infallible, has dared to put his decrees and his traditions on a level and above the scriptures. I say in its sanction, he alone on earth has pretended to pardon the sins which the law condemns, and to dispense from the duties which the law commands. I say in the extent of his promulgations, he alone on earth for 614 years. I mean to say, since the Council Trent in 1229 has forbidden the people of God to read the holy books, never was anything like it seen in Christendom. The churches of the East, corrupt as they are, have enthroned the scriptures in all their councils. The Pope is the only priest who has dared publicly to withhold from men the law of his judge and his God. I say to its contents he alone on earth has added to the oracles of the Old Testament, for example the Maccabees, regarded as human compositions in the time of Jesus Christ. I say in its morals, read what the Jesuits propagate. Read the directions given, this very year, to the confessors at Freiburg, Grenoble, Strasbourg, and in all Popish countries. Read the 326 authors of the Society of Jesuits, which were condemned in the last century by the tribunals of all Europe as encouraging every sort of crime, and which the Parliament of Paris caused to be burnt in 1760 by the public executioner, and modern Jesuitism by the Archbishop of Malines p. 212. Of these 326 publications, all of which are approved by 3 Jesuit theologians, to whom they were referred, 17 encourage immodesty, 28, perjury, 33, robbery, 36, homicide, 68, regicide, 14, simony, etc. All these abominations are allowed, recommended, sanctioned by the Roman Pontiff, by his formal restoration of the Order of Jesuits in 1814, by Pius VII's beatification of the Jesuit Liguori, the great advocate of immoralities of probabilism, and by his more recent pompous canonization under the reigning Pope, who thus canonized the detestable maxims exposed in vain by Pascal 200 years ago, and burned in vain by the executioner of Paris 80 years ago on mental reservation, on probabilism, and on philosophical sins. I say, lastly, in its doctrine, since he avows, by his plenary authority, heresies most opposite to the word of God, respecting image worship, exaltation of the priests, compulsory celibacy, auricular confession, an ecclesiastical priesthood, and a sacrifice in the Mass, respecting prayers to the dead, the use of an unknown tongue in worship, the adoration of many relics, purgatory, the universal dominion of the Pope, but especially marked this well by his professing precisely the 4 doctrines which Paul points out as the mark of the man of sin. First, lying wonders. Second, the worship of demigods, or deified dead men, which were worshipped by the Romans and Greeks under the name of demons. Third, the doctrine of ecclesiastical celibacy. Fourth, the prohibition of meats. Read the words of Paul 1 Timothy 4:1. 3. The Spirit speaketh expressly. He refers to Daniel that in the latter time some shall depart from the faith, giving need to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from meats which God hath created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth.
In the church in the days of the apostles who gave heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils is shown by the following: little children, it is the last time, the latter times, the last days. And as ye have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt have continued with us. But they went out that they might be made manifest that they were not all of us. 1 John 2:18-19. Paul also, after speaking of that man of sin who should oppose God and exalt himself above God, claiming to be God, said, For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. To Thessalonians 2:7. Then, since the spirit of Antichrist was manifested and doctrines of devils were taught and believed, very early in the Christian era, we should expect that the forbidding to marry and the commanding to abstain from certain proper food would also have found at least fulfillment then.